All right, so we have the new IPCC report that just dropped, and this is basically just a report that is done by a bunch of scientists. I think they said over 200 scientists were involved in this process. Almost 200 countries were involved in this process as well. So it's basically an entire global effort to analyze how climate change is continuing to affect humanity, what the future of it is going to look like roughly, and who's responsible for it. And shouldn't be surprising to anybody watching my videos, but basically this report is saying that humanity is guilty as fuck. Since the Industrial Revolution, we have been absolutely obliterating the atmosphere of this planet. And this report is signaling that we are in a code red scenario as they are describing it. So I'm going to read you some of the details here, and we're going to look at some of these pictures from some of these insane fires that have been happening recently across the world. This is one, I think, so they say this is firefighters try to put out the flames spread over a highway in northern Athens, Greece. And so I'll just show you some of the other pictures now. This was a video from Greece, right? So this was on one of the islands in Greece. And I mean, can you get a more apocalyptic scene than this? I mean, it literally, like, they were having to be transported off of these islands, evacuated off of these Greek islands, because so many of them were just completely on fire. I mean, this literally looks like a fucking movie right here, doesn't it? But yeah, I mean, completely ridiculous scenes out of Greece there. We also had the scenes in California from this Dixie fire, which is now, I think, the largest fire in the history of the state. And it seems like we just continuously break these records over and over and over again. It's just progressively getting worse. And I mean, look at this. This is the aftermath of a fire. I mean, it looks like it was a war zone, and this is just happening in California. So it's just completely ridiculous, the effects that we are seeing in firsthand right now in terms of climate change. So it's not something that's like some far off problem we're going to have to deal with in the future. As this report is signaling, this is shit we're having to face right now. And it's really only since more wealthy Western countries that have been starting to see the direct impacts of this, that the media has actually been focusing on it in a more serious way. So I want to read you some of the details from this report. So code red for humanity. The IPCC report warns window for climate action is closing fast. The alarm bells are deafening and the evidence is irrefutable. Greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel burning and deforestation are choking our planet and putting billions of people at immediate risk. So here from Jake Johnson from Common Dreams, fantastic reporter. He says, a panel of leading scientists convened by the United Nations issued a comprehensive report Monday that contains a stark warning for humanity. The climate crisis is here. Some of its most destructive consequences are now inevitable, and only massive and speedy reductions in greenhouse gas emissions can limit the coming disaster. So assembled by the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, a team of more than 200 scientists, like I said, the new report represents a sweeping analysis of thousands of studies published over the past 8 years as people over the world have suffered record-shattering temperatures and deadly extreme weather, from catastrophic wildfires like we just discussed to monsoon rains and extreme droughts, especially like the one we're seeing in California right now. And the result of the scientists' work is a startling assessment of the extent to which human activity, particularly the burning of fossil fuels, has altered the climate, producing, quote, unprecedented planetary warming, glacial melting, sea level rise, and other changes that are wreaking havoc in every region of the globe, wiping out entire towns, as we just saw with the Dixie fire, imperiling biodiverse ecosystems such as the Great Barrier Reef and the Amazon rainforest, and endangering densely populated swaths of the world. That story that I covered recently with the Amazon rainforest is that you would think that the largest rainforest on Earth, right, the Amazon rainforest, would be one of the greatest absorbers of CO2, but because of some of the fires that we have been intentionally starting in the Amazon rainforest as an ongoing consequence of the process of deforestation of the Amazon rainforest, it is now a net carbon emitter. The Amazon rainforest is now a net carbon emitter because of what humans have been doing in the region. So it's insane what we are doing to some of our last hopes for absorbing a lot of the CO2 in the atmosphere. But they continue on. One central finding of the new analysis is that the Paris Accord's goal, which, keep in mind, the goals that were set forward in the Paris Accord were supposed to be like the first step. So if we are unable to reach these goals, then we're not really getting anywhere in terms of progress, right? We're falling behind the already half-measured and half-assed goals that we had set in place. So they say, one central finding of the new analysis is that the Paris Accord's goal of limiting global temperature rise to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels is in serious danger as policymakers fail to take the necessary steps to curb greenhouse gas emissions, and each of the past 4 decades, according to the report, has been successively warmer than any previous decade. Dating back to 1850, atmospheric CO2 has soared to levels not seen in 2 million years, and global surface temperature will continue to increase until at least the mid-century under all emissions scenarios considered. So again, we're really more talking about how much we can mitigate the effects that are going to be coming as a consequence of climate change, and less so about dodging the consequences altogether, right? So they continue finally here, quote, Many of the changes observed in the climate are unprecedented in thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, and some of the changes are already set in motion, such as continued sea level rise, are irreversible over hundreds to thousands of years, reads the report, which again was approved by over 195 member nations of the IPCC. So they're talking about, and this is one common thing that I hear from conservatives, weirdly, like the Ben Shapiro types who say, oh, well, there's going to be sea level rises, you can just, sell your home, that if you live on the beach, you can just sell your home and move away, and everything within the capitalist structure of our economy will take care of itself. No need to worry about climate change. Well, they say these are unprecedented situations in thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. Well, guess what? Hundreds of thousands of years ago, humans didn't have the gigantic, complex civilizations that we have right now. So it's not as if climate change is going to lead to the eradication of the human species, as Ben Shapiro types and other conservatives like to strawman the argument. The conversation is more about, what are you going to do when there are hundreds of millions of climate refugees? What are you going to do when our global food supply system completely collapses? What are you going to do in these types of situations where you have entire cities that are being destroyed by wildfires that are completely uncontrollable? Denver, Colorado right now has the worst air quality in the entire world because of the fires that are happening in California. So what are you going to do to tackle these types of situations? It's not just a matter of, will humanity survive? It's a question of, what are we going to do about the consequences that are coming from this? So that's what they never like to talk about. But just some of the data here, some of the actual graphs. So you see here, I mean, this is just a graph in the change in global surface temperature on decade averages. So a change in global surface temperature, and you see it goes all the way here. So from year 500 to year 1000 to year 1500, then 1850, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution roughly, and you see it just skyrocket up into the atmosphere there, pun intended. So B, change in global surface temperature as observed by human causes versus natural causes, and you see who's at fault here. It's humans. We have been doing this. It's not natural. This is completely, like they said, unprecedented in hundreds of thousands to millions of years. So this is human caused. So because it's human caused, we know that humans can fix the problem as well. We just need to be taking the right steps, the policy steps, in order to actually mitigate some of these the dangers that are coming from this. And they say, here's our best chance. The new report, the first of 3 installments, was released just weeks before world leaders are set to gather in Glasgow for the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, which activists view as a pivotal moment for the global climate fight. Quote, many see COP26 as our last best chance to prevent global temperatures from spiraling out of control, Dorothy Grace Guerrero of Global Justice Now wrote last month, and quote, unfortunately, we are not yet on track to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the threshold that scientists agree will prevent most of the dangerous climate impacts. Failure to reach this goal will take a disproportionate toll on developing countries. So that's something we've known as well for a long time. Obviously, wealthier countries are going to be able to better avoid some of the consequences of climate change, even though they can't avoid everything, as we saw, again, entire towns in California being completely obliterated by these wildfires. But yet, what they're saying there is accurate as well. Most of the consequences of this will come from a lot of poorer nations who don't have the ability to adapt to the changing climate and the changing extreme weather conditions that we're going to be seeing as a continued consequence of climate change. So listen, they're putting it out in the open, right? They're saying this is what's causing this. Here are some of the solutions. We need to actually start addressing this. And meanwhile, we have a situation where we're negotiating climate legislation right now in this infrastructure package, and we have guys like Joe Manchin who are setting the terms of debate while they're going and taking weekly phone calls with ExxonMobil. It's a completely ridiculous, absurdly corrupt system that we have here in the United States, where everybody who's making decisions based on climate legislation is taking their cues from the fossil fuel industry that created the problem that we have right now. So if we're going to have even a hope of mitigating some of the damages that are inevitably going to come as a result of this, we need to start pressuring these corrupt politicians and doing it in a much more aggressive way, right? Because these people who are making these decisions are going to cost thousands of lives, hundreds of thousands of lives, potentially millions of lives. As again, we start to see a lot of these other poorer nations unable to handle and adapt to these changes. We need to start holding these people more accountable, and we need to put a lot more pressure on them, because the current status quo of allowing guys like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and all these other corporate Democrats who take money from the fossil fuel industry, allowing them to set the terms of the debate is unacceptable. As we see from the evidence laid out in this report very clearly, we need to dramatically change course, and we need to do it now.